Elizabeth at A Literary Princess. If you are new here, welcome. I'm a 6-year PhD candidate in English literature with a focus on Victorian women novelists. And as you might expect, I love to read. Today I have my January wrap-up for you. And it is so strange to think that it is already a month into 2025, but also January felt like the longest month ever. Like, I was looking back at the books that I've read, I was like, oh yeah, I did read that. It felt like forever ago. So, I've got 5 books that I read to talk about and then 1 that I did not finish. So let's jump in. So, the first book of 2025 was one that I got for Christmas. This is Holly by Stephen King. This is a mystery thriller focused around a detective named Holly, who is introduced in several other books that I have not read, but this works as a standalone as well. She is looking into the case of a missing woman, and it turns out this woman and many others are being killed by this couple of elderly professors from the local college. That's not a spoiler, we learn that immediately. So we move back and forth between Holly's point of view and the professor's point of view, and we move also back and forth in time from the present to the past when the professors are killing other people. And it's really good. I enjoyed this a lot. Seems to be a kind of polarizing book based on what I've read on the Goodreads reviews, because it takes place during the pandemic. There is lots of talk about masking and vaccines. There is also a lot of talk about the political climate of that time period. And you can definitely tell what Stephen King thinks of it all. He is highly opinionated. A lot of people were complaining about that. I didn't mind it because Stephen King has always been fairly political. I think this is just more noticeable, maybe for me, because I'm living it right now. Like, this is happening now instead of, back in the 80s when I was not alive, which a lot of his older works are, obviously. But yeah, no, I didn't mind it because, like I said, he's always been political, so I don't know what people are talking about when they're like, Stephen King should stay out of politics. Like, the amount of books where the government is the enemy that he's written? I'm like, what are you people talking about? But I did really enjoy this. I like Holly as a character a lot, and I am going to go back and read the other books that feature her because apparently her character growth from the first of those into this book is really spectacular. I also really liked that we have this kind of subplot with a young girl named Barbara who kind of does some detective work to help Holly and her business. But Barbara is an aspiring poet, and we have this whole subplot of her being mentored by this very famous poet and submitting her poetry to a contest. And I really love that. I would have read a whole book about that. So, Stephen King, if you want to just write a whole book about that, I'll read it. Not his typical thing, but I did really enjoy that subplot. So yeah, this was great. I gave it 4 stars. It was a really fun way to kick off the year. Next up is one that I was reading for my dissertation. This is Pascarel, or Only a Story, by Wida. So this is the story of a girl whose name I can never remember because it is literally said once in the whole book. Her name is Nella Uccello. This is one of Wida's Italian novels. It is actually the first of them, originally written and published in Italian, and then she translated it to English, which is very interesting. So Nella is the daughter of a kind of upper-class man who is never around and who seems to not remember to ever send them any money, so she mostly grows up in poverty. She ends up falling in with a group of traveling players led by the very charismatic Pascarel. And this is a love story. It's also a story about art and the importance of art as entertainment, as well as like this kind of high ideal thing. So my last book by Ouida, Ariadne, I did not get on with. So I was a little nervous going into this because this was another of her Italian novels, and I was just like, I don't know. I actually really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. I think there were some problems with the pacing at a few parts, particularly Nella's childhood in Verona. Like there's a lot, like it just spends a lot of time on that, when it felt like there were some things toward the end that we could have been spending more time with. But I ultimately really enjoyed this, and it put Ouida back in my good graces. However, I am not going to be writing on Ouida in my dissertation. I have spoken with my advisor and opted to drop that chapter, and will be making what would have been my conclusion into my 4th chapter. It had kind of grown into something that was more than a conclusion, and I decided it really needs to be its own chapter, but I don't have it in me to write 5 chapters, and the Ouida chapter was always kind of more iffy to begin with. However, I am really glad that I read this book. I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I'm looking forward to picking up my next book by her. Next up, we have another mystery thriller. This is The Secret Place by Tana French. This is the 5th book in the Dublin Murder Squad series. No, I've not read books 3 and 4. You don't need to read them in order. It's fine. In this, we are following Detective Stephen Moran, and he is approached by a young girl named Holly, who he has worked with in the past. She witnessed a crime, and her father is a detective in the murder squad. Moran works in cold cases, and Holly approaches him with this card that was tacked up on her elite girls boarding school's notice board called The Secret Place, where people can put up all their secrets anonymously. And it has the picture of a boy from the neighboring boys' school who was murdered the year before, and the case was never solved. And it says, "I know who killed him." So Moran sees this as his way to make his career and move from cold cases into the murder squad. So he teams up with the detective who had been the lead on the case, Antoinette Causeway, and they go over to the school and try to figure out what on earth is going on, who put up this notice, do they actually know anything? We move back and forth from the present timeline, which takes place over the course of one day, to the past, following Holly and her friends, because of course they are involved in the whole thing, naturally. This is so good. I've had this on my shelf for years, and I'm like, why didn't I pick this up sooner? Because I loved In the Woods and The Likeness, and I loved this. And I'm like, why did I wait? I don't know. But this was a 5-star from me. It had me guessing. I did ultimately figure it out, but only with about 100 pages left in the book. And I think really I only figured it out because I couldn't sleep one night and I was up thinking it through. And then I was like, oh. And honestly, the reveal happened like maybe 30 pages after where I was when I figured it out. So it really did have me guessing for a lot of the book. Tana French is a beautiful writer, and this is just, it's such a good mystery series. I just love it. So this was 5 stars. Next up, we have my first read for the 18th Century Novel Project. This is Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. I have a whole video on this, so I'm not going to talk about it in great detail, but I was pleasantly surprised by this. I didn't think I was gonna like it that much, but it's actually a lot of fun. Are there problems? Yes. Because it was written in the 18th century. Are there slow parts? Yes. However, It's a really good story, and I see why it gets referenced as much as it does and why so many people loved it, especially in the Victorian period. So this was 4 stars from me. The last book that I finished, I actually have a physical copy of, but it's hideous. It's a naked hardback that is stained. It is from the university library, so I'm just gonna put up the beautiful cover right here. This is Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. I read this as part of the Robinson Read-Along, hosted by Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading, and I am so glad that I finally picked this up. The book is told as letters from the Reverend John Ames to his young son. Ames has been diagnosed with a condition that is fatal to him. He is much older than his wife and married very late in life, so his son is still quite young, and he's not going to get to see him grow up. So he is writing some of their family history, some just kind of impressions and advice. We have a cat visiting us. Hello, Pippin. And then also some stuff, more current day stuff with the son of his neighbor, Jack Boughton. And a kind of falling out almost that happened there. So this was beautiful. I mean, gorgeously, gorgeously written. It's a very slow book. It's not plot heavy, it's very much character driven, but Robinson is a gorgeous writer, and there is something truly profound, like basically on every page. I started this on audiobook, and the narrator was fantastic. He was perfect for the character of John Ames. However, this was not a book I could be reading in the car, really. Like a listening to in the car when I kind of need something to hype me up. It's very quiet. So I switched to the physical edition, and I'm glad I did, because then I got to kind of mark down where quotes I liked were and remember them so I could write them down. I gave this 4.5 stars. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm so glad that I read it, and I'm very excited to read Home this month. So those are all of the books that I finished in January. I did have one that I started reading back in 2024 and that I ultimately DNF'd in January, mainly because I didn't have the mental bandwidth to deal with it. Étranger by Albert Camus, The Stranger. I am reading this was reading this in the original French, and it's hard. There's no notes in this edition, it's just French. And I mean, I was getting it. I was looking a lot of stuff up, but I was getting it. But I just did not have the mental bandwidth to deal with a book in my second language this month. I am really trying to power through my dissertation so that I can graduate this May. And I would get home from being at the library working all day, and I didn't even want to read a book in English, honestly. There were days when I just sat on the couch and vegged out on my phone because I'm I don't want to think anymore. I just need to not think. And this was way too much thinking. This is a soft DNF, as I've heard other people refer to it as. I'm going to be coming back to this later in the year, once my dissertation is done and submitted and I am free and have a little more mental space to deal with other things. But for now, I am DNFing it. So that is my January wrap up. Let me know down in the comments below, have you read any of these? What did you think? What did you read in January? If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my bookish content. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.